Hi, you guys. So today we're going to talk about Chapter 3 in Active Parenting, which is about responsibility and discipline. And those of you who are parents, you may find this useful, or think about your own childhood if you got this. And so many people walking around with no sense of responsibility, and they didn't learn this as children. So what is responsibility? Responsibility means that you accept your obligation. You do the right thing according to the situation, and you accept accountability for your actions. Now, some examples of how children can accept their obligations is if they own a pet, they are responsible for caring for it. When they're on a team, it means showing up for practice and games. Learning a musical instrument means practicing. Being in a family means doing chores. Being a student means doing homework and studying. Now, as far as the right thing as the situation calls for it, that's where you can kind of discuss with your kids, well, what do you think is the right thing to do? Because sometimes the right thing is illegal, like the Civil Rights March. Accepting accountability for your actions, that has to do with children having the freedom to make mistakes and not being punished for making mistakes. A lot of people don't want to take responsibility because they're afraid they're going to be criticized by someone or punished. And so growing up in a home where mistakes are just, you're learning and not being so hard on kids is really important. Now, we talked earlier in one of the other chapters about how children, as they get older, have more freedom and more responsibility. So they go hand in hand. The more responsibility you have, the more freedom you get. So a 15-year-old has more freedom and responsibility than their 3-year-old sibling. The way that people learn responsibility and freedom within limits is that you give children choices within, what is allowed, and you allow them to experience consequences. So that's important because discipline really is teaching children to be responsible without punishing them. It used to be that children were punished like in a dictator style, like they would get rewards or punishments, and that doesn't teach kids anything, because if you reward them for doing something by giving them money or a treat, then they will just do it for the treat, not for the intrinsic value of learning responsibility. And then if you punish them, they will listen to you, but they'll be afraid of you and they'll silently resent you, and they're not learning good habits. Likewise, some parents have no rules for their kids at all. They let them do whatever they want. And that's how you end up with these very entitled adults who do whatever they want without regard to anyone, because they never learned that they had to think of other people. So, if you want your child to do something, there are sequences that you go through. One, trying to explain this. The first thing to do is to make a polite request. If that doesn't work, you use an I statement. And if that doesn't work, you use a firm direction or logical consequences. This is if the parent owns the problem. Sometimes the child owns the problem. They have really good flow charts here in this book. So we're going down this approach. If the child has a problem, like say they have a problem with a friend at school, or they lost their bike, or they didn't get invited to a party, then that's a different thing. Right now we're talking about the parent providing discipline to the child because the parent needs the child to do something. So the parent owns the problem, and this could have to do with the child cleaning up the room or doing their homework or doing their chores before they go outside to play, and they don't want to do it. You got to teach them all that stuff. Okay. So now in discipline, remember that our goal is to teach children not to hurt them. So if your child doesn't do what you want, you can't just yell at them or hit them. That doesn't teach them anything. You got to have a little bit of foresight and a little bit of self-control here. And you also want to encourage the child when they're making positive behaviors. And you want to make the discipline be caring. I mean, yeah, sometimes we lose our temper, but overall it can be done in a caring way. And the thing was, when I had my kids, the first 2 years I had kids, I did what my mom did with us. Like, she would be super sweet, and then if she got really annoyed, she would just yell. And I felt very powerless. But once I learned these techniques from this book, I didn't have to yell anymore because I got my power back. It's kind of like when you're, those of you who have done dog training, dog training is very different from training children, but there are certain techniques you use to have your power. Like, and with dogs, it's different. It's not democratic. It's like you're the pack leader. So once you realize that in the dog training, your dog will be well behaved. You no longer have to worry about your dog misbehaving or barking or jumping up at people who come over, because you know what to do. This book is more on like behavior modification. It's really training the parent. This is really about training the parent. So what do? The first thing you do if you want your child to do something is you make a polite request. So, for example, honey, from now on, will you do me a favor and bring your dishes to the sink when you're through with your snack? Polite request. And if your child agrees, you say things that will be a big help. But if they forget, you say, honey, I noticed you forgot to put your dishes in the sink. Please come get them. If the child keeps forgetting, you have to go on to the next step. But I always like to start with a polite request. And children, especially as they get older, and if they're in a cooperative home where they feel loved and appreciated, they will comply with your polite request. You don't usually have to do more than that. Or I would even get to the point, you can get with older children, you can just say, oh, I noticed the dishes on the table. And then you let the child figure out what to do instead of like, put your dishes away. It's such a turn off. You can just say, oh, I noticed your dishes on the table. Oh, I noticed those shoes on the floor. And then the child sees it and they get to say, oh, I left my shoes on, and put them away. Okay, if the polite messages don't work, you go to I messages. And again, this works with adults as well, you guys. So in an I message, you say how you feel without blaming, so the child doesn't get defensive. It puts the emphasis on the behavior and also instead of the child being bad, and lets the child know what behavior you want. So for example, the behavior you want changed. I have a problem with your leaving dirty dishes on the coffee table. How you feel. I feel taken advantage of. State your reason. Because I have to spend time and energy cleaning up behind you. And then say what you want done. I would like you to bring your dirty dishes to the kitchen and put them in the dishwasher when you leave the den. Okay, so you can also add to this, when will you be doing this, and getting an agreement, would you do that? So you can kind of, add on to this a little bit, but basically instead of telling the child, clean up your damn dishes right now, which is such a loser move, don't do that. So, and this is like a very long I message. And you don't have to be perfect, just do one of these steps at a time, but it would sound like this. I have a problem with you leaving dirty dishes on the coffee table. I feel taken advantage of because I have to spend time and energy cleaning up behind you. I would like you to bring your dirty dishes to the kitchen and put them in the dishwasher when you leave the den. That's a real mouthful. I have to say I never really said it like that, but I think I got close enough. I think that's good enough. Now, if that still doesn't work, you don't want to just like keep yelling at your kids and repeating yourself. They'll just tune you out, and it's annoying. You don't want to be an annoying parent, right? So if they still don't do it, you just say, dishes, sink, now. Just like, use as few words as possible. But some kids are very obstinate, or they're forgetful or whatever, and then you go on to logical consequences. Logical consequences are different from natural consequences. A natural consequence is something that will just happen naturally. Like the child goes to school, didn't bring their homework, and now they're at school and they're embarrassed because they don't have their homework. That's a natural consequence. It naturally happened. But in disciplining, we need to come up with logical consequences. And this is so important because a lot of parents will punish the child. Like, oh, you didn't put the dishes in the sink, so you don't get to watch TV, or you can't have a friend over. And it's totally unrelated. It's a punishment. It doesn't teach anything, except it makes the child hate you. And it's just a weak parenting style. It's not powerful at all. So this is what you do. You didn't know, don't blame yourself. This is what you do. So if your child forgets to put the dishes back from the den into the kitchen, then they just can't eat in the den anymore. They have to eat in the kitchen. Or if Carly refuses to put away her toys, her mother puts them in the closet out of reach until the next day. I would even wait a week or something. Be like, okay, if these toys aren't cleaned up, I'm going to put them in a box and I'll put them up high for a week. You decide. And after a couple times of that, I never had to do it again, because you got to follow through and not just talk. It's action, not words. Same as with men. Action, not words. We want to look for action, not yapping, yapping, yapping. When Dennis the Menace uses crayon on the wall, he must use his time and energy to wash it off. Those are all examples of logical consequences. The difference between logical consequences and punishment is that they're related to the misbehavior. They're not an arbitrary retaliation. Punishment is just an arbitrary retaliation, and it teaches kids to blindly obedient behavior. It's delivered in an atmosphere of anger, and it's disrespectful, and it's dictated by authority. So that's why punishment is bad. Whereas logical consequences are logically connected to the misbehavior. They're intended to teach responsible behavior. They are administered in a firm and calm manner. They are respectful, and they allow the child to participate. So here are some examples of logical consequences. It's either or when then. I use this a lot with my kids. Like I said with the toys. Hey, you guys, you can put your toys away right now. You can put your toys away, or I will put them in a box for a week. You decide. You know, and then don't get mad if they leave them out. Just quietly put them in a box, put the box away for a week, and then get them out again. Give them another chance to try. I did that with my little grandson when he didn't want to put his train tracks away. And after once or twice of that, when I said it, he immediately just started putting all of his train tracks back in the box. And there was no anger, no resentment. You have to expect to teach your kids things. They're not going to know all this stuff. So that's either or. Another example, Calvin, either put your dirty clothes in the hamper or wash them yourself. You decide. Give them a choice. Don't get angry. Just be calm. Believe me, once or twice of that, they're going to do it. This is an investment in your child. And do this in the first, start doing this when they're 2 to 5. This book is for children 5 to 12, but the earlier you do it, the better. When then? Maria, when you have finished your homework, then you may go online. You know, when you have finished your piano practice, then you can have your friend over. Or then you can watch TV. Now, the important thing is to not be nasty or angry, like saying, for example, you would say, Tom, when you have cleaned your room, then you may go play outside. But do not say, Tom, you may not go play outside until you've cleaned your room, because that sounds like a punishment. Instead, remember, when you have cleaned your room, then you may play outside. You see the little subtle difference in intention and tone and respect? Let's do another one about the toys. This is what not to say. Catherine, put your things away or I'm going to throw them in a box in the basement. That's punishing. Instead, Catherine, either put your things away or I'll put them in a box in the basement. You decide. Then you're not trying to change the child or control a child or manipulate a child. You're giving them the choice, and that way you can stay very calm. Believe me, they will choose to put it away. Now, another thing that you can do, and I've done this many times, is you help your child set the consequence. The consequence has to be related, and sometimes you want to also let the child know ahead of time for something new, like, okay, we're going in the store now. I expect you to walk next to mommy, and if you start running off, then mommy will put you into the cart. It's up to you to decide. You let them know ahead of time when something new will happen. And sometimes it's hard to think of a logical consequence. And then you can ask the child, and they will come up with some really good ones, actually, believe it or not. Children often misbehave simply because they don't know what we expect from them. They don't know where the limits are and how much freedom they are allowed. So discuss potential problems together and decide on the needs of the situation. And see, all this empowers the child to learn, to be responsible, to feel important, to have a say. Because the idea is to raise our children to be independent so they can be self-sufficient and go out on their own. And by the time they're teenagers, they're going to be in situations where we're not there to advise them or look out for them. They may be offered drugs, or someone may pressure them into sex, or skipping school, or stealing candy from the store, or anything like that. So they have to have that inner sense of responsibility, and that's nurtured when they start learning how they feel, when their feelings are reflected back, when their decisions are trusted, when they're part of a family, when they're disciplined instead of punished. And they start developing some real self-esteem around being accountable, being reliable, keeping their word. And a lot of people in our society do not have these skills, and they didn't learn this as children. This is how people learn to be responsible. They learn to be responsible because they are taught to be responsible in a home that's calm, loving, and teaches them. And if they make a mistake, you don't punish them. Just say, that's okay, like, they spill something. That's all right, we can clean it up, have mommy clean it up. That's why it's so important for parents to be calm, and I really, really love this. This is so good. I think every parent should be taking this class. It changed everything for me, and I believe a lot of the reason that our 3 children turned out as well as they did is because of me having taken this class when they were very little, and then taking it again, because I didn't know any of this stuff. And I took this back in the 90s. Okay, this ends chapter 3. In the next class, we're going to talk about misbehavior, what to do about misbehavior, why kids misbehave, and what you can do about it, so you don't have to lose your control and start yelling. And thank you for watching my video.